Hello Penguinauts, I'm the Beardy Penguin and welcome back to Kerbal Space Program Endurance. Been a little bit longer than intended because I had the norovirus, which was particularly unpleasant, but I'm almost back to full strength now, and so we should hopefully be getting back to normal. Normal, which is one endurance video roughly every week, or mainly when I actually have time / can be bothered to make them. Yeah, I don't have a schedule and I never will, because this isn't a job, it's a hobby, and I've said it many times, but somehow it doesn't seem to go through to many of you. Anyway, so what we're doing today is essentially a bunch of ongoing missions that we have all around the solar system. You see there we just did a bit of a course change maneuver for Reclaimer, and now we're doing yet another one for Tribute 2, which is our spacecraft heading to the Wasteland to survey it and its moon Malice for resources. But we're going to spend most of our time here with this spacecraft, Memory. We launched this, I mean the name is kind of appropriate if you can actually remember, a really long time ago, like half a series ago, and we launched it out towards Eltos, the furthest planet from Archangel, which was originally called Eeloo. And yeah, it's certainly fair to say that the surface has changed considerably since Archangel began turning into a red giant. The ice of Eeloo has begun melting and actually has a very thin atmosphere now. So our main space probe is powered by massive solar arrays, because I wasn't entirely sure just how good solar power would be out here. But then we've got 4 little atmospheric probes there powered by fuel cells, because I didn't know whether small solar panels would be enough. Turns out we still get more solar power here than you would on Kerbin in the base game. Only slightly more, but yeah, just solar power in this mod is so unbelievable. Hence why we're going to be creating massive solar farms to create a beam power network later on in the series, and when we finish this sort of early phase of interplanetary exploration. But yeah, it turns out we didn't even need the Gigantors. We probably could have done with just some smaller ones. But hey, you know, better to be safe than sorry and overbuild the spacecraft. We have a pretty hefty burn here to get ourselves down to orbit. This planet's got a little bit sort of weird properties. The near space science biome is really close to the atmosphere. The atmosphere technically goes to 50 kilometers, and the sort of near space biome, you know, we can get science is just below 60. So you really do have to be very close to the surface. But although the atmosphere technically starts at 50 kilometers, it really starts at about 38 kilometers, which is a little odd. I think it's just because the atmosphere only actually gets thick enough at that point for you to actually, you know, for it to actually be measurable. But I guess it technically goes up to 50. I don't know. But anyway, we can get a pretty startling view of the pretty sweeping changes that have taken place on this planet. It used to be a little frozen snowball that people visited if they had either, you know, a lot of time on their hands, just because with standard time warp it takes a long time to get out here, or they had some kind of cryogenic mod installed, or, you know, just don't have life support mods installed at all, I guess. I remember I did a mission to Eeloo years ago, for a Christmas episode of KSP. It must have been some like 2 or 3, it would have been 3 years ago now, for Christmas. I think that's the only time I've ever actually been to Eeloo, besides sending orbiters to it in career playthroughs, but then never actually playing the playthrough long enough for the orbiters to ever arrive. So yeah, this is the furthest I've gone into a career playthrough, I think, possibly ever. I don't think... Yeah, I've never completed the Interstellar tech tree entirely and actually got to a warp drive. I've completed the stock tech tree, but never on these difficulty settings. This is the reason why this series I think is a lot of fun for me, is just because it is actually a lot of new stuff. A lot of the early stuff in KSP, you know, the launching with the mystery goo and getting all the base science, exploring the system, it's all the same, which kind of kept me for a long time from playing through all that just to get to the cool later game stuff and getting through all the grind. So having a planet pack to play with where all of that initial stuff is as awesome as it was, the first time you played KSP, it's all new. That's really what's made this series as fun as it has been for me. So there we go, our first atmospheric probe has finally touched down. Not on the surface though, we've actually touched down in one of the oceans of Eltos. So yeah, it's really quite beautiful. You see we get a beautiful sunrise there. Is it a sunrise or is that a sunset? I'm not entirely sure. I think it might be a sunrise. No, it's a sunset, isn't it? I'm thinking. Yes, it's a sunset, I think. Probably wrong. Anyway, you'll see that, yeah, after some time, this space probe kind of sinks into the water. The gravity isn't very high on this body, so I don't know why this happened. But yeah, we started sinking deeper and deeper into the ocean, but we've got all the scientific data we need, so we're just going to leave it. It's a little bit awkward since our orbiter is actually in such a low orbit of Eltos. We don't have it passing over for long enough to be able to transmit all the science. So each time we land these probes, we have to wait a couple of orbits for the orbiter to keep going overhead so we can transmit our science, because those little fuel cells on there can only produce so much power. So they can only transmit so many scientific experiments at once. Anyway, it's a good thing that it has an atmosphere, because again, with the orbit of our memory main relay being so low, usually we can't actually maintain direct contact with the probes all the way down to the surface. So thankfully a single parachute is enough for these lower biomes where the atmosphere is a little bit thicker. And of course our probes are very light anyway, so a single parachute does actually do the job. So we land next in the freezing lowlands of Eltos, our first actual surface landing. And yeah, it's a very barren but also pretty beautiful world actually. I think it has oxygen in the atmosphere, since the atmosphere is generated by the ice gradually melting. So I think it's potentially habitable. It's just so far away from Solitude. Yeah, I don't think we're ever really going to send any Kerbals here. Maybe once we've invented the warp drive or really powerful fusion rockets, we might send some people here. But yeah, the furthest I think we're going to send our Kerbals is to Reaper, or Jewel as it used to be called. And I have some pretty interesting plans for that mission. That's going to be essentially the big send-off for this series, because I've decided that this series is going to end at 50 episodes before we then transition into the next series where the focus is going to be different. But that Jewel spacecraft isn't going to arrive until the next series. So I'm going to sort of end this series with our Breakthrough Starshot mission, where we build the Endurance and we send it off towards Valentine. And then the next series is going to all be about preparing for that interstellar voyage and then eventually launching it, which I think should be quite interesting. So you see there we've landed our third probe. Now we've landed on the surface in the cool lowlands. I think one of these should probably be the Midlands, because there's freezing lowlands and cool lowlands, and there's also highlands, but there aren't any Midlands. Are some sets of lowlands colder than others? Who knows? I don't know. Maybe that's a mistake on GamesLinks' part, maybe not. We had a little bit of an explosion there, but it turned out it was just one of the separators. You probably noticed right now that the probes are all upside down on these. Yeah, we're pointing at our prograde marker, but we're actually burning retrograde. That's a mistake on my part when I built these atmospheric probes. I just built them onto the side of the spacecraft because they didn't need to be particularly sophisticated. They just needed a bit of fuel, an antenna, some landing legs, parachute, and a couple of scientific instruments. We don't have any mystery goo or anything. It's just the repeatable scientific experiments, because I didn't know quite how much delta V it would take to land. Well, first get to, and then of course land on the surface of Eltos. So I just wanted to make these very small little atmospheric probes, just so we could get a bit of extra science and land on the surface. So we have to actually do a powered descent here, because since we're a little bit higher up, the atmosphere is much thicker. The atmosphere thins very, very rapidly, so a single parachute isn't actually enough to get us down to the surface. So we just about managed to maintain contact for long enough to get it down to the surface. Almost forget to turn the fuel cell on there, so we cut that a little bit close, but thankfully the probe hibernated, so we were able to turn it on before it ran out of power and we lost communication with it. So we've managed to get ourselves some science from the chilly peaks of Eltos as well. And you'd think that would be sort of the end of our mission, but I actually have a little bit of a crazy idea here. Now, we have no further use for these probes. They've got all the science that they can get us. So now we're going to use them as impactors. So we've set up seismic recording devices all across the surface, so we might as well smash our excess probes into the surface and then generate a little bit of science, and we can determine a little bit about the makeup of the mantle of Eltos and the crust and the various cryotectonics that are taking place within it, so we can actually get ourselves quite a lot more science from these readings. We get a lot more science from these. Well, I think we get about as much as from the rest of the scientific instruments combined. And we get 100% of the data from those. We don't have to actually recover them, so it's always very nice. And now this space probe is practically useless, so we have a bunch more scientific instruments on this than we did on the small atmospheric landers. So what we're going to do is just very, very gently dip into the upper atmosphere and grab a bit of science and all the scientific readings we can take. And you see here that, yep, the atmosphere starts at 38 kilometers, even though it really should start at 50 kilometers. I'm saying, I think it's just because it's so thin up here, it thickens so rapidly near the surface. There we go, just grab ourselves some scientific data and then transmit all of it once we can extend our Gigantor solar arrays once more. And there we go. So memory is just going to sit in orbit now, and we're probably not going to see it or Eltos again for the rest of the series, but we did visit it at least. So now we've actually visited every single body in the solar system apart from Drizzen, which we'll be visiting probably in the next few episodes. So with the science from that, we can now get all the tech we need to actually build the Endurance soon. So we get our plasma thruster, we get a bunch of our beamed power technology, and some very large and powerful mirrors for collecting solar energy. So in a few upcoming episodes, we'll actually be building the spacecraft that will be heading Interstellar and the network of solar arrays that will be powering it. But before then, we've got a little course change for Odyssey to make sure it actually gets back to Solitude, and Odyssey and Reclaimer are actually going to arrive 24 days apart. So yeah, they're both going to be arriving pretty much the same time, which I don't know, I find kind of poetic. And now it's time for us to head over to Tribute 2. We did the course correction earlier in the episode, and now it's actually arrived at the Wasteland. So if you don't remember, we're just doing a mineral survey of the Wasteland and also Malice, and then the secondary objective of this mission, as you can see, we have some communication satellites. So we are probably going to be sending some future manned missions to the Wasteland. I mean, it is the original home of Kerbalkind. It's still got a Kerbal Space Center on it that we haven't fully explored because our lander didn't quite have enough Delta V to land that close to it, so we just had a single Kerbal walk over there. We really should have sent a rover with that mission. And built a bigger lander so we didn't have to then ditch it back into the atmosphere because it ran out of fuel. Yeah, that whole mission was a bit of a disaster. Somehow ended up working. I have no idea. But then I didn't really know what I was doing, and I wasn't using Kerbal Engineer back then, so hey, you know, I think I did pretty well, all things considered. But anyway, the main focus of the mission is the mineral survey. So we've just done a survey of the Wasteland, and then once we've got our communications network set up, we're going to go ahead to Malice, which is the more important thing because that's where we're more likely to set up a bit of a colony. So maybe just a science outpost, maybe just something capable of producing life support and keeping its Kerbals happy so that we can leave them here for an extended period of time doing research. I don't think we're going to get another off-world manufacturing plant, especially considering just how many modules and just how expensive it's been to set up an off-world rocket production facility on Nemesis, and that's around, you know, our home planet. But maybe when we master that and we know exactly what modules it takes and exactly how much it'll cost, maybe we will build some kind of off-world manufacturing base here in the Wasteland system. It might be interesting to actually have two different planets where we can launch rockets from, but that would be a pretty huge undertaking and not a project that we're going to be doing anytime soon. So you've seen this before when we set up our communications networks around Guardian and around Nemesis, just getting our satellites into roughly equal orbits. The orbits here are actually pretty skew-if. But it doesn't really matter what the orbits themselves are, as long as the orbital periods are all exactly the same. I think we get them to within a few millimeters, not a few millimeters, a few milliseconds of each other. Yeah, they're certainly not within millimeters of each other. They are many hundreds of kilometers apart. No, but we do manage to get them close enough that, yeah, they're not going to go out of sync for a few thousand years, and by then we will have long departed this system. So now it's time for Tribute 2 to head out to Malice and do a survey of the resources there, and also act as a relay satellite for any spacecraft that might travel to the far side of Malice, because the comms network there is designed to just work around the Wasteland, so it should be able to get communications from any point on the surface. But if in the event that a spacecraft heads out to Malice and is on the far side, then it might not be able to ping a signal to one of them. So that's what Tribute 2 is going to do, using the last of our ion fuel, which has allowed us to be very sloppy in our maneuvers. We really haven't done things particularly efficiently here. I've been sort of doing things half trial and error because I didn't want to have to do any calculations, and also because I wanted to get some cool cinematic shots, and going into polar orbit around the Wasteland really did get us some beautiful shots of its rings and its moon. You see there we're doing our orbital survey. It turns out Malice does not have the correct resource concentrations for us to actually be able to construct a self-sufficient base that can produce rockets. Malice and the Wasteland together do, but that would require us to ship resources up from the Wasteland. Yeah, no, it's not going to happen. We might construct a research base, as I said. It has got the resources required to make it some kind of life support, constructing base, some kind of agricultural colony in the future, and support maybe an SSTO heading down to the surface and getting science, but you know, that's for a future episode. And you see here, finally, Phaethon is also arriving in the Wasteland system. This utterly pointless mission that's just paying us a stupid amount of money. There is no scientific gain for sticking an asteroid around the orbit of another planet, but it pays us a few million funds, and it will fund our future colony building efforts on Nemesis in the next episode. Thank you very much for watching, everyone. I have been the Beardy Penguin, and I will see you all next time.